This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsa Hone, and it's Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. At this point, I've been doing top 10s for 5 years, which is pretty crazy, and in that time I've done more than 350, and 50 of those have been on creature types. But I still haven't looked at the most plentiful creature type in all of Magic, and that's humans. Part of the reason for that is that researching humans is really daunting. So it took me a lot of time to go through and look at all the cards, since there are 2,581 humans. Humans appear on just about every plane in Magic, and that is what has resulted in them receiving so many cards. For comparison, if we look at all the cards that have the enchantment type, there are only slightly more enchantments than there are humans, because there are 2,616 enchantments. Anyway, today I'm finally getting around to looking at all these humans, and in this video we'll look at the 10 of those 2,581 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. As you can probably imagine, with so many humans, this list is pretty stacked, and the number 10 card on it has 100 points. Before we get to the list though, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A top 8 at a Pro Tour, Players Tour, Mythic Championship, Mythic Invitational, Legacy or Vintage Championship is worth 2 points, while a top 8 at a Grand Prix or Magic Fest is worth 1 point. At number 10, it is Jace Vryn's Prodigy. This human is a double-faced card and can transform into the Planeswalker Jace Telepath Unbound. While a human, Jace comes with the ability to loot, which is a pretty nice effect on its own. It improves the quality of your draws while also allowing you to load up your graveyard. But it's even nicer here because it helps Jace transform, and once he does, he comes with a +1 that weakens creatures, which can help him survive, a -3 that lets you flash back a spell from your graveyard, and an ultimate that allows you to quickly mill out your opponent. Jace has been particularly well suited to decks that can quickly load the graveyard and or are interested in doing stuff with spells. He was played a ton in standard control decks and has also found success in modern Legacy and Vintage Delver decks. Jace is likely to continue to gain points. At number 9, it is Den Protector. This human comes with Morph, and she can bring cards back from your graveyard when she turns face up, and she comes with an evasive ability that actually makes her kind of a good attacker. It was just very easy to get 2-for-1s with Den Protector, and that made her a heavily played card during her time in Standard. She was especially nasty when combined with Deathmist Raptor. If you turned her face up with the Raptor in your graveyard, you get a card back from your graveyard to your hand, and the Raptor returned to the battlefield. And that's an engine that powered a lot of decks in Standard, especially green-white Megamorph decks. She was heavily played in Standard, showing up in just about every green deck, and that allowed her to gain over 100 points just in that format. She is the only card on this list that isn't actively adding up points, and while her Standard performance between 2015 and 2016 has been enough to make this list right now, Den Protector probably won't be on this list for very much longer, as there are plenty of humans close to her score who are still actively gaining points, like Jace Vryn's Prodigy, Aethersworn Canonist, and Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, and it is likely those cards will end up on this list in the near future. At number 8, it is Monastery Mentor, a human that comes with prowess and the ability to churn out a 1/1 with prowess every single time you play a non-creature spell. The Mentor can add huge amounts of damage to the board in a hurry. While it has only seen some modest success in formats like Standard and Modern, it's thrived in the Eternal formats where there are lots of powerful, and free, spells that trigger this ability. In those formats, Monastery Mentor serves as a great win condition in a variety of decks. In Legacy, this has primarily been Miracle decks, and in Vintage, the Mentor spawned an entire archetype named for it. Ultimately, Monastery Mentor proved a little too good for people to be allowed to play a full 4 copies of it in Vintage, and this led to the Mentor being restricted in Magic's most powerful format, which can tell you a lot about how powerful this card is. Even with the restriction, lots of Vintage decks are still playing the 1 copy they are allowed, and the Mentor will continue to accumulate points going forward, and it's likely to remain on this list. At number 7, it's Grim Lavamancer. You may have noticed that it doesn't actually say human on the type line for Grim Lavamancer, but that's because it was given the creature type retroactively. It's kind of strange because there are so many humans, you might assume that it's always been a creature type, but it wasn't actually introduced until Mirrodin, released in 2003. Then, with the release of Lorwyn a few years later, Wizards initiated what they called the Grand Creature Type Update, which implemented a race class model for most sentient beings' creature types. And this added human as a type to a whole bunch of cards, including Grim Lavamancer. Anyway, now to the card itself. The Lavamancer is just a 1-mana 1/1, but it has a great activated ability that lets you turn cards in your graveyard into damage, allowing the Lavamancer to give you some serious reach or the ability to destroy small creatures very easily. The Lavamancer has received 2 printings, something that has contributed to its high score. While he was never played a ton in Standard, because it's usually hard to get enough graveyard fuel going in that format, the second printing did give him legality in Modern, which is where he's gone on to considerable success, especially in Jund, Burn, and Zoo decks. It also has points from Extended Red Deck wins in Burn, Legacy Delver, and Vintage Canadian Threshold. Grim Lavamancer is available on Magic Arena thanks to Jumpstart, and that means you can play it in Historic, but so far it doesn't have any points in that format. It is likely to continue to put up points in other formats going forward, though. At number 6, it is Tassiger, the Golden Fang. Tassiger comes with the powerful Delve mechanic, which means that if you're good at loading your graveyard, it isn't too hard to cast this 4/5 human for only a single black mana, but there's even more than that going on here, because he also has a pretty sweet activated ability that helps you load up your graveyard while also giving you back a card from it. Your opponent does get to choose the card, but at least it's a non-land, so you'll be getting something real most of the time, while also reloading the graveyard that Tassiger very likely consumed. Unsurprisingly, Tassiger has been good in graveyard decks across every format he's ever been legal in. Standard may have been where he was the least graveyard-oriented, as the deck he was featured in most was Abzan, and that deck did have a graveyard sub-theme, but it wasn't a huge theme. All of Tassiger's non-standard points, though, have come in more graveyard-heavy decks, like Dimir Inverter in Pioneer and Hollow One in Death Shadow in Modern. Tassiger is another human who's likely to remain on this list going forward. At number 5, it is Dark Confidant. This 2-mana 2/1 human draws you an extra card every turn, which is super powerful. Obviously, there has to be some downside for that effect, so the Confidant does make you lose life equal to the converted mana cost of the card you reveal. But that downside is well worth it, especially in decks with low curves. Drawing lands will be free, life-wise, and on average, he will only make you lose 1 life a turn in decks with really low curves, and you'll be able to kill your opponent before losing life matters anyway, thanks to all the extra cards the Confidant draws you. The Confidant has been played in just about every Magic format, and is one of the best 2-drops in the whole game. He's been the most successful in Modern, where he's been a fixture in Jund decks since the format's inception. He also fits quite well into Legacy lands, where you have a really high chance of not losing any life at all, and still drawing extra cards, because your deck has an inordinate number of lands. Dark Confidant will continue to gain points going forward. Also, fun fact, this was an invitational card, which means that a Magic Pro who won a special tournament helped design this card and got their likeness on it, and in this case, it was Bob Marr. At number 4, it is Delver of Secrets, a card that I bet some people figured would be at number 1, but that's just how stacked this list is. There's actually 3 cards on this list with more points than Delver of Secrets. Delver starts as a 1-mana 1/1 human that will transform into the 3/2 flyer Insectile Aberration if you reveal an instant or sorcery off of the top of your library on your upkeep. This double-faced human is sometimes referred to as a 1-mana 3/2 with flying because it's so easy for decks that play it to transform it quickly. Some even consider the Delver to be the best 1-drop in the entire game, and there is certainly a good argument for that based on its multi-format success. Now, the Delver does ask you to play a bunch of instants and sorceries so that it can transform, and as a result, the Delver isn't part of more traditional aggro decks that are just jam-packed with creatures. Instead, it's played in aggro control decks, which seek to win the game using nice, efficient creatures like the Delver, but also pack a bunch of spells like counter magic to protect it. Delver decks have emerged in every format Delver of Secrets has been legal in, and it is likely that it will continue to gain points going forward. It will be interesting to see whether or not it can break into the top 3 in the long run. At number 3, it is Noble Hierarch, a human mana dork. The Hierarch can tap for the Esper colors of mana, and it comes with Exalted, and that means it's a mana dork that actually makes your board better at attacking, which isn't something you often get. On its own, it can attack as a 1/2, and it's nice that in addition to giving you serious mana fixing and ramp, it also makes one creature into a better attacker. While it was of course played in Standard, as is the case with just about any mana dork, it's continued to see a ton of play in both Modern and Legacy. In Modern, it's pretty much become the mana dork of choice, giving it an absolutely massive score in the format. It has been a key card in decks like Birthing Pod, Humans, and Infect. It's also been played in Legacy Infect. The reason it's nice in Infect is that those decks often attack with a lone creature anyway, so in addition to getting some extra mana to work with, it also makes the opponent get poison counters faster. At number 2, it is Tireless Tracker, a human that is an insane value engine. You get a clue every time a land enters the battlefield, and that means it's incredibly difficult for an opposing player to ever come out ahead against Tireless Tracker. because, generally, she nets her controller a single card at worst, and not only does she make all those sweet clue tokens, she gets bigger when you use them. This simultaneously makes her a value engine and a win condition, not something most 3-drops can say. This level of power has proven good enough to give Tireless Tracker considerable success in multiple formats. It was played a ton in Standard, pretty much being featured in any green deck you can imagine, but it has also become an important card in Modern, where it's been featured in a variety of decks, ranging from aggro decks based around Collected Company, to Scapeshift and Primeval Titan combo decks, to more mid-rangey decks like Jund or The Rock. It's also found considerable success in Legacy Lands, a deck which runs a ton of lands, and the tracker is able to spit out a ton of clues in a deck like that. More recently, it's also gained points in Pioneer and aggro decks, as well as Sultai Delirium, and it's going to continue to gain points going forward. And at number 1, it is Snapcaster Mage, which, by this point, is probably pretty obvious. This human allows you to cast an instant or sorcery from your graveyard when it enters the battlefield. Because it has flash, this means that you can give an instant in your graveyard flashback and then cast it. That's especially potent with counter magic, but really, getting to cast any instant or sorcery from your graveyard is a pretty good deal, especially because you also get a 2-mana 2/1. Snapcaster usually shows up in control decks, and it isn't completely unheard of for a Snapcaster deck to just win the game with this little 2-mana 2/1 as an attacker. Snapcaster Mage has been played in every single format it's ever been legal in. Blue control decks in all of Magic formats feature Snapcaster Mage and continue to feature Snapcaster Mage, so it's very likely it will continue to be number 1 on this list, even with the other cards behind it still seeing a ton of play. Also, like Dark Confidant, Snapcaster Mage is an invitational card, and in this case it bears the likeness of Tiago Chan. Well, those are the 10 humans that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. If you want to own any of these cards, you can find them at Card Kingdom. In the description, you'll find a direct link to each of them within their store. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that more people will see it. And if you want to make sure you stay aware of future videos, subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you want to catch up on old videos, you should see some playlists on your screen now. Lastly, consider subscribing to my other YouTube channel, Nitsahone History, where I put my PhD in history to use. Thanks for watching.